Wow. Uh, Take your seats. Bill, I cannot thank you enough for that incredible introduction. And Monica, you know that we love you all like, part of our family. So thank you. To Frank Gaffney, Christine Brim, and everyone of Center for Security Policy, thank you so much for this honor. Thank you for allowing me to be a teammate on this battlefield in which we find ourselves. And to each and every one of you that are gathered here tonight, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. This is not about an honor for me. It is about an honor of who we are as an American people. When I understand this great building and what it represents, this great building represents freedom's flame. Because the people who first constructed this great building, they did it because they believed in one simple thing. If this country would own up to its intention and its promise that all men were created equal, that they had to prove it. And so they constructed this Union League Club. And the people that were allowed to come in here and work were people that looked like me. But they were free men and free women. They understood what freedom's flame meant, and they understood the challenges to it. When Frank talked about what day would be appropriate to have this ceremony, I could think of no better day than today. It was on this day, 58 years after D-Day, that I assumed command of a battalion in a division that landed at Utah Beach, the 4th Infantry Division, steadfast and loyal. And that is the moniker that I wear on my suit tonight. And when you think about this week in our American history, it is not just about D-Day, but let us remember, as I'm sure Admiral Lyons knows from naval history, of an incredible battle that happened in this week in 1942 when freedom's flame was challenged. It was 6 months after Pearl Harbor. It was 1 week after an incredible defeat at Coral Sea. The USS Yorktown barely limped into port. And when it limped into port, it was told 5 to 6 months it would require to be repaired. But Admiral Nimitz knew that freedom's flame was challenged. And Admiral Nimitz turned and said, "We don't have months, we have days." And because of the commitment to freedom's flame, because of a commitment to American industrialism and individual strength, the USS Yorktown steamed out after 72 hours and joined up with the USS Enterprise and the USS Hornet at a tiny little atoll called Midway. And there at Midway was the turning point in the Pacific Theater of Operations when those American sailors did what was absolutely phenomenal. And it was called the greatest naval battle of all times, the greatest defeat of the Japanese Navy in 350 years. And it enabled us to continue to march against Japanese imperialism. It enabled us to continue to ensure that freedom's flame would burn bright. We see these Marines that are here. They will tell you that following Midway, we began those Solomon Island campaign. One of the first places that we went was a place that defined what freedom's flame would be, a place that defined what heroism is, and that was Guadalcanal of the 1st Marine Division. But then a couple of years later, freedom's flame once again shone brightly when men of the 82nd Airborne Division and the 101st Airborne Divisions on the 5th of June 1944 dropped in behind enemy lines. Because of the German anti-aircraft fire, because of the weather, they were strewn all over, many times missing their drop zones. But it was freedom's flame that guided their way to their objectives, to secure the proper terrain, to make sure that those gun emplacements that could affect that coming main assault would be able to happen. And then, on that incredible morning, the 6th of June, 1944, 69 years ago today, the greatest invasion that man has ever known, Operation Overlord, hundreds of thousands of brave Americans landed. The unit that I served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm was the 1st Infantry Division. Our motto was no mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first. And I can imagine that as those ramps went down, those men knew it was duty first. And they continued on through that withering fire on Omaha Beach. But I recall the words of Brigadier General Teddy Roosevelt Jr., who was the Assistant Division Commander of the 4th Infantry Division. They actually landed on the wrong beach. But his words were this: this is where the war begins. That is what we must come to realize tonight. It was not too long ago, I believe about 3 years, that I was on a panel in this exact same room. On either side of me was Andrew McCarthy, and the other side was the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dick Myers. And we were asked one simple question: how can we define who this enemy is? Andrew kind of waffled a little bit. Chairman Myers waffled a little bit more. But if you know that video, I said one simple thing: I'm not here to be politically correct, and I know that this will probably get me in trouble, but this has to be said. This is where the fight begins, ladies and gentlemen, for each and every one of us. Because freedom's flame is being challenged, and you all know it. Just a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact, it was yesterday, we saw a 230-point drop in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Why? Because one person made a simple intonation that maybe we will stop printing money. That lets you know that this economy that we have is not sustainable. When you talk about freedom's flame, it's about our economic freedom. It's the right monetary policy, it's the right tax policy, it's the right overall fiscal policy that inspires American individual industrialism, that inspires our ingenuity, that inspires our innovation, that inspires who we are, the greatest nation that the world has ever known in 237 years. It is not because of an onerous big government, because freedom's flame burns in each and every one of you. And if you're not careful, if you allow that flame to be burned out, then maybe we won't be here 50 years, 60 years, or 100 years from now. That cannot be our legacy. When you think about the threats that we have all across this great globe, yes, the Islamic totalitarianism, but think about what is happening with Iran. Think about what is going on in the Middle East. Look at what is happening in Syria. Look at China and the expansion that they're embarking upon. The Senkaku Islands, the Scarborough Shoals, going into India, the great massive attacks that they have had, cyber attacks against us, going after our military secrets. We need people that will be committed to freedom's flame at this moment in time. Just as those men and women that you see in uniform right now, there are men and women out there on freedom's ramparts. And if we do not have the right type of leadership that enables them to do one simple thing, it's the mission of the United States military to fight and win our nation's wars. Unfortunately, I'm going to say something, and you guys, since you're in uniform, put your fingers in your ears because you can't hear this stuff. But the National Defense University, we saw a speech that basically said that the United States of America was surrendering. When you think about the speech at the end when the president said victory will no longer be defined by people standing on a carrier deck and someone signing a piece of paper saying surrender, that is not what we fight for. As Ronald Reagan said, when they asked him, how do you define victory? He said, we win, they lose. We cannot have our young men and women go out on this battlefield to do what they have always done, from the men of Lexington and Concord, to safeguard freedom's flame, if we don't have committed leadership back here that understand what it means to be on the receiving end of an AK-47, a PKM, or an RPG. Because if you know what it means to be in a firefight, then you don't go to bed when you have former U.S. Navy SEALs engaged in a firefight. What do I believe will happen for this great republic? I believe that the American people will rise up. I believe that the American people will once again understand what it means to be free once they see that freedom can be taken away from you. I believe in the words of Winston Churchill when he said that Americans will eventually do what is right after they have tried everything else. And we are certainly trying everything else. But the most important thing is that I believe that Americans will once again understand what it means to be free. Americans will once again want to be on top. Americans will once again understand that there is something about us that is unique to us, that is different from all other people, and that each generation passes on freedom's flame to the subsequent generation. That is our legacy. That is what we must ensure. We cannot be that first generation of Americans that leaves less to the next generation, to our children, to our grandchildren. The challenges are great. The challenges may seem daunting, but think about how daunting it was when the men built this great Union League club. Think how daunting it was when the USS Yorktown set sail to marry up with the Hornet and the Enterprise. Think about how daunting it was on the early morning hours in the night, jumping out of a C-47 aircraft into the darkness, knowing that the Germans were there. Think about the challenge of the ramp going down on Omaha Beach or Utah Beach, or the challenge of scaling the cliffs of Point du Hoc. Americans always meet challenges. That's why we are the nation that will always carry freedom's flame. When you go out tonight, if you have a chance, go by the Statue of Liberty and understand that is why so many people have come here to the United States of America, because of freedom's flame. May God bless you all, and thank you for this distinct honor.